Thank you for joining us this evening. This is the third in the series of political roundtables being held at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Michael Penn. I'm the president of the Shingetsu News Agency and the board of directors secretary of the club. I'll be your moderator tonight for this event. Those of you who've already attended these events, of which there's a couple, already understand that the format of the roundtable is a little bit different from our press conferences and our normal events here at the club. It's different in the sense that the people who have the nameplates in front of them, who are in the front of the table, it's not simply them who are speaking and giving their opinions. It's meant to be an exchange between us and them. That means that you're free to give your opinions as well as questions. And once we get started, it's a full open discussion. Our topic for today is the politics of Fukushima, which we haven't touched yet. Of course, every journalist who's worked in Japan the last couple of years has certainly done many stories about Fukushima, whether it be about the lives of the people living around the plant, or exclusion zones, or stories about health risks, or many, many different stories, or how it's affected the nuclear power industry. There's many, many dimensions of this story. But one side of it that maybe gets downplayed a little bit is how did Fukushima affect Japanese politics? And maybe the reason it doesn't get discussed so much as it seems kind of cold-blooded when you're discussing a great tragedy in which so many people have suffered. But since this is a political-themed roundtable, and since it is such a huge event, it's something that we have to discuss also from the point of view of, shall we say, political gamesmanship, and how does it affect the political system more broadly. But we'll also touch the other issues as well, I think. We have 2 hours for discussion. In the middle of the event, we'll have a 10-minute break. And this is a networking event as well as a discussion. So if you haven't already exchanged meishis with people in the room or had a chat, you'll have 10 minutes in the middle to do so. We have 2 guests, and as usual, format we've done so far, one of them is a practicing politician and one of them an analyst of Japanese politics. The practicing politician is this man here next to me. His name is Mr. Tsuyoshi Shiina. He is a House of Representatives lawmaker of the Unity Party, or in Japanese, Yui no To. And I believe probably at the opening, if he doesn't volunteer the information himself, I will ask him about it. He's been involved in one of the commissions that has studied the Fukushima question. So he really does have an inside view on how the Fukushima issue has played out inside the Japanese political system. And on the further side is a scholar. His name is Christopher Hobson. He is at Waseda University, and Fukushima seems to be one of his main research themes, and he's been following it very closely. So he also, I'm sure, has a lot of other insights to give us. So let's move to the discussion now. And the question which we begin with, just to open up what we're going to talk about, I've asked both of these people to give a 5-minute introduction on this question. Has the Fukushima disaster transformed Japanese politics? And if it has, to what degree, in what way? So we'll just start with that very broad question, and we'll let the discussion flow from there. I open it up first to Mr. Shiina.
Thank you very much. My name is Tsuyoshi Shiina from the Unity Party. I'm very happy to have a chance to discuss with you about Japanese politics after Fukushima nuclear accident. Now, I'm the Michael, as Michael said. So I'm the member of House of Representatives from Unity Party, the Unity Party in Japanese Unito, which is the newest established party in Japan last December. the party position is kind of economically right wing and like libertarianism and kind of free trader, and in the sense of security policy, kind of center or center right. Conversion of realist views and Japanese pacifism. As he said, prior to jumping to politics, I worked as a researcher for Japanese Diet Affiliated Commission, so-called Kurokawa Commission, National Diet Fukushima Nuclear Accident Independent Investigation Commission, which is so-called NAIC. NAIC submitted the report to Diet speakers on July 2012. And I was the member of the researcher. That report says something like the Japanese, some kind of issues. I would like to pick up some political issues, right? One is kind of Japanese regulatory bodies issues, which is so-called regulatory capture. I think because of the information asymmetry, the regulatory body is kind of controlled by the kind of operators of nuclear power, in the sense, in the time of kind of drafting the regulations, and also the Japanese regulatory body's feature, very big feature is not separation of the regulatory body and a promoter of the nuclear power, and also it is kind of in Japanese anzen shinwa, which is so-called, which is kind of safety dogma. Everyone believes that nuclear power is everyday safety.
I believe in English we've been calling it the myth of safety.
Myth of
safety myth. Yes.
Safety myth, right? Regulators and the kind of operators, and also the citizens around the nuclear power, all are caught in their own trap, right? And also, the regulator is also based upon bureaucracy system, and they are caught in trap of myth of bureaucratic infallibility, right? They cannot change the way of how to make safety or of the nuclear power, which is I mean, kind of lack of political leadership to on the issues of nuclear safety, and the regulatory bodies, and they postpone of solving issues, which is not realized at that time, but potentially important, they need to make a countermeasure for a severe accident, earthquake, and tsunami. Those are clearly anticipated, but countermeasure is not prepared. Those features are reported by the NAIC reports, so I think it's those features of the Japanese politics or Japanese bureaucracies. Is it changed or not? I think some part of them are changed, but there are they are very stable and not changed. I think the changed one, main one, which is changed, is kind of the separation of regulatory body and promotion agency. And after the Fukushima accident, nuclear regulatory agency is separated from the METI, Ministry of Commercial, Ministry of Economy, Trade, Industries, and from separated from METI to kind of Ministry of Environment. And also the myth of safety is collapsed. NRA-led nuclear regulatory agency led operate a strong conscious of safety of the nuclear powers. And they created new regulations on the end of 2012, and this is very new and strict safety regulations. And the thing is that these regulations are a retroactive application to the existing nuclear reactors. But many things are not changed, even though the government is changed from DPJ to LDP, and LDP government has changed their nuclear power policy from future abolishment of nuclear power to the very promotion of nuclear power, which they called nuclear power important baseload power generations. And also they are promoting to resume the nuclear reactors, which is 17 reactors of 10 sites, right? The thing is that LDP's energy policy is still drafted by bureaucratic or public servants. I mean, their policy is led by bureaucracy system. It's not still there are lack of the kind of political leadership. Especially LDP's policy is led by METI, and therefore politics does not care so much about the safety of the nuclear reactor. And also the very important issue of Japanese bureaucracy, I forgot to mention, sorry. Before Fukushima, many issues around the nuclear powers are kind of safety and also commercial nuclear reactors and research purpose reactors, facilities of radioactive isotope, and also nuclear safeguards of non-proliferations and nuclear securities and health of workers who work on nuclear powers. Those are governed by the different ministries. Commercial nuclear reactors and nuclear fuel cycles are governed by METI, and mixed Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology are in charge of research purpose reactors facilities for RI, radioactive isotopes. MOFA is foreign affairs on the kind of nuclear safeguards and nuclear securities. And Ministry of Health, Labor, Welfare in charge of health of workers who work in nuclear facilities. Those are a kind of main features of Japanese politics and Japanese bureaucracy. I think silo approach. This is not totally changed. The government is mainly led, not politics, but the bureaucratic systems. And also, the last important thing is that I think the government is not good at the risk communications with the citizens living around the sites or around nuclear power. If they resume the nuclear powers, they needed to communicate with the citizens, and they needed to get the consent to resume the reactors. But still, the government does not change the approach to make get the consent from the citizens.
All right, maybe you should hold on there, because I think that'll draw us into a later part of the discussion. But as I understand the main body of your answer, that the bureaucratic system, for the most part, has not been transformed, except for the fact that the Nuclear Regulatory Authority has been separated from promotion of nuclear power. So that's basically you're basically saying there's not a major change except for the Nuclear Regulation Agency.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Chris, I throw the question over to you. How do you feel? Do you see a transformation in Japanese politics since 3/11?
Okay, thank you, Michael, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and talk with you all. I think we're kind of reaching a point now. It's been about 3.5 years since the disaster. I mean, I think we are starting to reach a point where we can make some type of assessments about how it's affected the political landscape. And I think at least the kind of the immediate opinion kind of coming out of academia, especially this argument's been made most forcefully by Richard Samuels, is essentially continuity has overridden change when looking at Japanese politics. And when we think about disasters, we kind of expect them to be moments of rupture and change, but often this doesn't actually happen. And in most cases, the narratives, the positions that existed before the disaster continue afterwards. And if you look at the political landscape today and you ask, which major political actors have genuinely changed their position on nuclear power, there aren't that many, I would suggest. I mean, the two most prominent ones are Kan and Koizumi. But against this kind of focus on continuity, I do want to point out two areas where I think there has been change, and I think Fukushima is responsible partly. The first one is, I mean, I know we've got academics and journalists around the table, so I think we're all very aware about what's happening at the moment in Japanese politics. This is a nice change from when I'm teaching at Waseda and I say, did you watch the news? And they said, no. So this is really positive when I don't have to beg my audience to read the news. But I mean, we've been seeing a series of very significant changes by Abe and his administration, and he's really taking full advantage of being in a position of considerable power with the LDP in charge of both houses. And if we want to look at how the LDP is in such a commanding position, I think Fukushima becomes very relevant. The DPJ, were completely routed in the 2012 election. I think they lost, about 3/4 of their seats. Now, obviously, this cannot be traced purely back to Fukushima. The DPJ were having serious problems before then, but I think the perceived mismanagement of the triple disaster, and especially the nuclear disaster, was a very significant factor in the DPJ being defeated to that extent. So now we're in a kind of situation where hopes for a two-party system in Japanese politics have been severely set back. And I think it's important to consider Fukushima's role in this. I mean, something I would like to talk about later, but I mean, I think connected to this, I think former Prime Minister Kan was, on the whole, unfairly scapegoated for his leadership during the disaster. And I think as we look towards the future, I think more and more analysis are going to point towards Kan playing a determinative and, on the whole, positive role. And my personal opinion is I would have much rather had Kan in charge than many of the other recent prime ministers we've had. And I think in many ways the DPJ were just very unlucky to be stuck holding the can when the accident happened. They had to deal with institutions, structures which were put in place over half a century by the LDP. Okay, when the accident happened, they'd been in power for a bit longer than a year. They'd obviously had a limited amount of time to make genuine change, but I think they received a lot more blame for what happened. The second point I would like to note, and this is a kind of an obvious one, but I think it's really democratized the issue of energy politics in Japan. Now, clearly it hasn't been enough to determine political outcomes at the Tokyo or national levels, but the days where the so-called nuclear village were able to control energy policy are gone, okay? And the people may not have a veto power yet, but public opinion is now playing an important role in determining the shape of energy policy. And, you know, I think this is going to be a very important factor moving forward. I could keep going, but I think it's better if I probably stay brief and we go.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, I'll throw one short question to both of you, and then I'll open it up to the room. One thing that has been very clear since 3/11 is that the opposition parties tried to use the anti-nuclear issue as their main political issue for the past couple of elections, including the Tokyo gubernatorial election, and each time they've gotten crushed. Did they make a mistake on trying to seize on this anti-nuclear issue as being the overriding issue in the last couple of elections? So how would you assess this political strategy? And that's open to both of you.
Yeah, it's difficult because I condemned in my elections. I said anti-nuclear issues, right? In the long term, right? So I said in my policy in my campaigns, I said that the nuclear power is future. In the future, nuclear power should be abolished, maybe 20 or 30 years long term. So I succeeded in my election. So. I do not think this strategy is bad strategy. So, but still, although many people are maybe around 60% of the people are against nuclear powers, still the results of the election is many results of elections are only the loss of the anti-nuclear power candidates. So I don't think it's side by side. So, you know.
Okay,
Chris?
I mean, I can understand, given the persistent polls which indicate that the majority of the public are now anti-nuclear. I can certainly see why anti-nuclear was kind of pushed as an issue, but I'm trying to think of any politicians or parties which really put forward a very strong, coherent, persuasive argument of what the alternative to nuclear power would be. I mean, the DPJ flip-flopping towards the end of their time in power really didn't help the cause at all, and simply saying, yeah, we're going to get rid of it in a couple of decades is not really a particularly detailed policy. And I mean, in the case of the Tokyo election, there really wasn't from the Hosokawa and from Koizumi, there wasn't a very coherent argument about what the alternative would be. And when we look at nuclear power, I think we really need to appreciate quite how deeply embedded it is in Japanese politics, the Japanese economy, also Japan's alliance with the United States. Japan moving away from nuclear energy is a very difficult thing for it to do. So for that to happen, you need to provide a very coherent and plausible argument for how that's going to happen. And I haven't seen that appear yet in the political arena.
Okay, anybody who wants to jump in with opinions or questions?
I think that kind of argument is very difficult to say. But still, when I get into politics, I said so. We need to make the deregulation of the electricity, right? So degeneration of electricity leads kind of the competition of the cost of the nuclear power and geothermal and so on. So if that competition starts, maybe in the future, I mean, so if the cost of the alternative energies are growing lower, so the operators shouldn't choose the kind of nuclear powers in the future, maybe still 40 years later or 50 years later. This is my thing, but still, I think it's not still plausible, but still not coherent, I think.
Yeah, actually, I mean, that just made me think of one other point. I mean, when we look at the impact of Fukushima in terms of thinking about Japan's energy policy, there's a tendency to compare it to Germany and sort of say, well, Germany was able to decide to get rid of nuclear quickly. Why can't Japan? And I think it's really important to remember that the decision that Germany reached was not one which was hastily made. That was the conclusion of a discourse which started with the Chernobyl accident, okay? And there was 20 to 30 years of discussion and also build-up of alternative energy sources. So that was the conclusion of a long discussion, not the start. And really, it's only been 3.5 years since the accident. This is the first serious discussion Japan is having about its energy future. So I think it's going to be a while before we get some type of consensus, or at least some better coherence between public opinion and what the government is arguing for.
Okay, Christoph?
Yeah, first, of course, this is absolutely
please,
right.
Introduce yourself
Oh,
first.
yeah, my name is Christoph Neidert. I'm the correspondent of Süddeutsche Zeitung here. You're absolutely right about Germany, but I wanted to ask you, or bring up the topic about, you said Fukushima is not a cathartic event for Japanese politics. Now, if you look at history, very often the people living through events wouldn't have experienced things as cathartic, and then the historians kind of assign a certain event to the big change that happened actually incrementally. Now, if you look at Japan, I feel, do you feel Fukushima in hindsight could become a cathartic event, and maybe not in a direction of saying goodbye to nuclear power or something like that, but the end of the Japanese democracy? Because what all the things that have happened since December 2012 are anti-democratic movements, and as you just said, they are related to the Fukushima accident because the DPJ lost so badly.
Yeah, Christoph, before we answer that question, could you kind of play that out a little bit? I'm curious. How do you see the events since December 2012 as being anti-democratic? Could you give us 2 or 3 examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows. Yesterday, or is it the day before, the secrecy law? I think I called what's going on now kabuki politics. It's just show and talk. I don't see any change. I don't see any third arrow. I don't see much of a second arrow either, except that money is from construction companies. So this all happens without any democratic control. I mean, why did yesterday happen when the Diet is out of session? By accident, probably.
All right. So is the Fukushima disaster the sort of the Manchurian incident of our times?
Well, I mean, I would like to first counter that by saying I would definitely disagree with the suggestion that everything which has been happening post 3/11 has been anti-democratic. I mean, I think there's actually been a lot of positive signs in terms of civil society movements and civil society activism. Now, this hasn't been determinative in terms of policy making, but it has been significant. Okay, and I don't think we should downplay the degree and the strength of protests that have emerged. Also, the range of NGOs and grassroots movements which have been engaged. I mean, I think it's hard to say how influential they'll be over the medium to long term, but I don't think we can completely downplay them. So this, for me, is one issue, one element where there have been some positive signs. And in terms of the direction Abe is going, I mean, sooner or later, his political capital, I think, has to run out. So I'm not at all concerned about Japanese democracy disappearing, but I'm not necessarily convinced it's heading in the right direction. I think the much more corrosive issue is the way that Fukushima has really broken the trust between Japanese people and Japanese authorities. And this is something which really has not been properly addressed. You can build higher seawalls, you can install vents in reactors, you can do whatever you want. But if you're simply trying to solve these problems by building more, by using more concrete and addressing them with technological issues, it's not going to get to the heart of these problems, which is to do with affected people not trusting what they're being told by TEPCO, not trusting what they're being told by the government. This also makes decontamination efforts relatively useless, because it doesn't matter what the scientific readings are telling you in terms of whether it's safe or not. If people don't believe it's safe, then the decontamination is not working. And so this breakdown in trust is a really, really big problem. And over the long term, democracy really needs trust to work and survive. And this, for me, is the kind of the bigger concern than what Abe's doing.
Yeah, Christoph, follow up, and then Martin.
I agree with you about the civic society. However, I'm kind of torn. One day I think this is just, they were just venting it. They won't go anywhere. They are too soft, too weak. They don't get enough response from the general population. On the next day, I think this is all very promising. But what you just mentioned, the society and the government have never been as far apart as now. So in that sense, we could move toward dictatorship or revolution. I mean, it cannot go on like that, definitely. We are somehow we are in a pre-revolutionary situation that the government doesn't get it yet, but the nation seems to get it, that they're not happy with any government in this country anymore.
Could I just, I mean, it strikes me there are two issues which have the potential to kind of bring Abe's run to an end. The first is obviously sooner or later, I think, if Abenomics doesn't play out, or the perception that it's not working becomes dominant. I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to try and pass judgment on Abenomics, but there are strong signs that it may not work out. So this is one issue. And second, in terms of nuclear issues, when we look at reactor restarts, I think you can have between 10 to 15, which I think even up to 17, the ones which have applied so far, can be relatively uncontroversial insofar as if they pass the new NRA standards, there's a possibility for them to be restarted with not sufficient protest for it to be prevented. But there's this huge grey zone where there are a large amount of reactors which it's unclear whether they can reach the NRA's regulatory standards. And if there's a strong push to try and get those to restart, this strikes me as when public sentiment could become more determinative.
Want to go to Martin next?
Martin Colling with the German Financial.
I don't think it's on.
Martin Kolling with the German financial daily Handelsblatt. You mentioned that trust is the fundament of democracy, but I mean that basic feature of democracy is mistrust. Mistrust the people in power. And this is what has lacked in Japan in the past, at least when it comes to the democratic discourse. Most of the discourse was buried in need channel in the past, which was not recognized as basically civic source or not as political discussion. And it seems that we are basically now going back even further than during the old times. Okay, we have more demonstrations, but the media seem to be more and more under control of the government in many areas, in many regards. So, for me, the most encouraging feature after Fukushima was this development of mistrust. Yeah, that people were starting to question government decisions. And now, with the new government in power, with no opposing forces basically left in the parliament, no real big opposing forces left in the parliament, this sentiment seems to fade away. What do you think of that? Do you see that this that the people are still very active, that they are still hoping to be able to control people in power, or are they now giving up again?
I'd like to throw that to Mr. Shiina first, because you're talking to your constituents. How do you feel? I mean, what's their reaction towards the government? Are they very distrustful, or are they still quite trustful of the government, in your opinion?
This is a very good point, I think. So, from the viewpoint of the citizens, I think the 3/11s changed the people's mind exactly. So, I think in my district, in my constituency, the people are going to make them not trust the government, and they are start to, of course, as you said, they question the government. They're hiding some information about something like that, especially from the day before yesterday. The cabinet resolutions said that they are kind of the government changed the interpretation of the Article 9 of the constitutions, which I think this is very good point. But thing is that, as you said, media's issues. So this is very big issues. I think media is starting to question the government also, but still the Japanese media does not have the kind of talent, or have not the talent to question the kind of the governmental propagandas, right? So the next time, I think next stage should be that the media should growing up in their kind of research abilities or something like that, right? Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I would just like to make I think it's important to separate what I would call, for lack of a better expression, positive mistrust from corrosive mistrust. And I would agree that the people having a healthy skepticism of what they're being told by the government, what they're hearing in the media, is a very important component of a functioning democracy. And that developing post 3/11 is I think, certainly a good thing. And my feeling is it's still there. It might not be as prominent as it was, but I think that skepticism about what people are being told is not going to disappear anytime soon. But the danger is that it also there's another kind of mistrust, which, for lack of a better expression, I would call corrosive mistrust. And this is where, people are not believing what they're being told by scientists. We've now had a number of studies by different UN agencies pointing towards there being limited physical health impacts from the disaster. Many people simply refuse to believe this. Also, as I said, with decontamination work, there's a basic problem of people not believing what they're being told, this creating serious mental health problems. So I think there's this kind of mistrust is kind of quite problematic. Also, the experts have really been very heavily discredited, nuclear experts, because of their associations with the nuclear village. So this creates a serious problem for the Nuclear Regulatory Agency and Japan in general. So if we want to know about nuclear technology, if we want to know about radiation issues, who do we listen to and who can we claim to trust? Okay, we listen to the IEA. Oh no, they're run by a Japanese guy, can't trust them. They're just supporting nuclear anyway, we can't trust them. Japanese academics, nah, they're all on the payroll of nuclear utilities, we can't trust them. Who are we left with? And, this is a real problem. And I think we're going to have to find some way to rebuild trust in, for lack of a better term, the nuclear village, because they're here and they're going to stay, and nuclear power is not disappearing from Japan anytime soon. And I think where there needs to be a lot of change is in the way that, for lack of a better term, nuclear village is communicating with the Japanese public. Recently, I had a meeting with the international advisors for the NRA, and what they were all strongly arguing for was transparency and improved communication. And these are areas where I think Japan has been struggling.
I'll come to you next. I just want to sort of finish up with Christoph's first point, which was a very striking one. Basically, he feels that Fukushima set off sort of an anti-democratic movement in Japan. I think we can read it both ways. We can see, for example, all the protests in the street, more grassroots activities. We can say that's sort of the flowering of a democracy. But on the other hand, the incident, like, for example, the secrecy law and other issues which have come up. I want to ask both of our main speakers, in your estimation, has the net effect of the Fukushima disaster been to make the Japanese political system more democratic or less democratic?
Can I add something to that? You're right. I feel there is an anti-democratic movement, but I think this anti-democratic movement is happening because of this growing mistrust, because Japan had a moment or a few months where we felt like it's getting more democratic. And this establishment, the Abe companies, they are afraid of democracy, totally afraid of, so they are kind of fighting their last fight. They want to keep their they want to keep, let's say, the system, not to become too specific. So that's just to add to your question.
So I think I got it. So sort of this beginnings of democratic movement made the anti-democratic forces afraid and basically pushed them to more stronger action. Okay, how do we feel about this idea?
Well, I guess I'll take a first bite at that question. I think if we look at the state of the DPJ government on the 10th of March 2011, it was looking in pretty bad shape. And I think based on where they were at that point in time, there's a pretty high chance that they would have been voted out of power. whether I think it would have been unlikely it would have been by such a large amount. I also, I think then there's an open question about whether there would have been enough force for the LDP to regain both houses. But they were definitely in trouble, and I would be cautious about overstating the effects of Fukushima in kind of pushing Japan on a, quote, anti-democratic path. I think it's a combination of very bad luck with Fukushima, misrule and by the DPJ. You also need to look at external factors such as China, also the economy. These things all fed into Abe coming to power and Abe having a strong mandate. And so I don't think we can single out Fukushima as being that determinative in terms of where we are now. I think it's important, and I guess where my comments started were as I don't think people are drawing enough of a line between Fukushima and the complete obliteration of the DPJ, because I think that's a really important point, because we don't have a two-party system anymore. But for me, I'm ultimately confident that Japan's strange dysfunctional democracy will keep on dysfunctioning, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But the way I could do it, I think we more missed a chance for Japan to become a much more functional two-party system, and that has disappeared.
I need to say I want to say that we need to separate the current political arena's situations and the effects of the Fukushima nuclear disasters. I think totally what you are saying is kind of relating to current Japanese political arenas, right? So as he said, it's because I think the Japanese two-party system was collapsed after 2009's election. 2012 elections. So, and that's why our Unity Party is trying to make a coalition in the opposition parties, right? We, Unity Party, and Japan Restoration Parties and DPJ or something like that. So these are kind of trials to make two-party systems again, make Japanese politics function, politics functional, right? So our trial is kind of, as he said, it might be not gonna function, not functional, but still we needed to try to make our another two-party systems. So and I think totally the father. I think totally the effects of the Fukushima disaster is, I think, positive for Japanese, making Japanese democracies movement more, and totally many people are going to saying something against what government is doing, not only for the nuclear issues, but also kind of the security issues and healthcare issues, something like that. So, but still, thing is that so many anti-nuclear, anti-war people is not making coherent arguments, or they don't have any kind of plausible arguments. I think that's the problem. So the next stage of the Japanese democracy. So anti-something people should make more, should study something about and make more strong argument, strong and how can I say? Yes, I think so.
So in other words, they need plausible policies that can be implemented. Yes. All right, you've been waiting very patiently. Now you're on.
Hi, my name's Tom Davies. I'm from the University of Birmingham. I'm not a political scientist. I'm a human geographer. And I've been looking at the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, trying to compare it with Fukushima, and to try and bring in a bit of a historical perspective for what it's worth, which might be nothing. We're now 3.5 years since Fukushima, 3.5 years roughly after Chernobyl. The Soviet Union collapsed, it imploded, and with the hindsight of history, embarrassed Sovietologists and political scientists often blamed Chernobyl for having such a political outcome on Ukraine, Belarus and Russia, the rest of the Soviet Union. It's interesting we're talking about trust. It's also seen as impacting trust as well in terms of who do you trust? Not the government, certainly. From a political science point of view, is there any value in comparing these two disasters? And if there is any comparison to be made between Chernobyl and Fukushima, should we expect more to come politically in Japan?
Okay, I think the way that I'll answer that is I'm going to dodge the implicit comparison about the USSR going under and Japan. I think I want to focus on the issue of trust, and specifically a lot of the mental health problems that have happened in Chernobyl we're seeing play out now in Fukushima. And hopefully Yuri can join in on this because he's done a lot of relevant work on these issues. I think what Japan needs to be doing when we kind of make this comparison with Ukraine is not only look at the Ukraine for where there have been problems, but for where there have been possible solutions. Now, I've done only a bit of research on this, but MOFA has actually funded through the Human Security Trust Fund quite a lot of work in the Ukraine, also in Belarus, I believe, on human security approaches to restoring people's lives in regions affected by Chernobyl. And there's actually, I think, quite a lot of knowledge within the UN and within MOFA that we could potentially draw upon. Okay, Japan has a tendency not to want to compare itself to lesser developed countries. But I think there are a lot of lessons that Japan can be taking from other countries. And I think also Japan is wasting a lot of expertise. Japan has been consistently a very significant aid donor. It has a very important role to play in international development. There are many lessons that we can learn there which can be applied to Fukushima. Okay, the biggest problems in Fukushima are to do with mental health, lack of jobs, the social system. These are all things where we can take lessons from the Ukraine and how the Ukraine's dealt with it. There are also important parallels that we can draw with post-conflict situations. In post-conflict situations, there are issues to do with breakdown of trust. There's a need for reconciliation. These are all issues which are, again, very relevant in Fukushima. Japan has funded programs related to these issues in developing countries throughout the world. I think Japan really needs to, rather than seeing itself as this kind of unique country and Fukushima as this kind of unique accident, recognise that it shares a lot of commonalities with a lot of other situations and start drawing on its own expertise in other countries and applying that at home in Fukushima. And I mean, I know also, Yuri, can you talk a little bit about this? Some of the centres that have been set up in the Ukraine to help with, I think, improving people's knowledge of radiation. And I mean, I remember you talked about it, the event in February. I'm trying to remember what they're called. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Dozo.
You mentioned my presentation in Fukushima.
Yeah.
Can you please introduce yourself first?
Sorry?
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Yuri from Ukraine Embassy and in charge of Fukushima Chernobyl Corporation. I'm not a nuclear expert. I'm just diplomat in charge of collaboration and witness of accident and coordinate activity Ukrainian researchers, Ukrainian authority with Japanese side, as well as Nuclear Investigation Committee and DIET visited Ukraine 2 teams in 2012. One of them is a member of House representative, our guest, also visited Ukraine. And many committees from METI, TEPCO, and government, headed by Fukushima University, visited Chernobyl as well, restriction area, and Kiev, where some researchers institution, and they gain knowledge and expertise from Ukrainians to promote, to provide in Fukushima. And one of the great lessons, as mentioned, is mental psychology. And in Ukraine, 1991, we established 5 special center for educational psychology and rehabilitation nationality from Chernobyl impact. And in Kiev, Korostyn, and five cities in Ukraine around Chernobyl, and on front of United Nations and Ukrainian government. Japan, of course, was involved in this establishment around 23 years ago. And nowadays, they center provide many activities with adults, children, to explain impact of Chernobyl, where the citizen could help and be undergo about cancer, about explosion, or something like that. Very simple and easy language. And training with teachers, training with doctors. Because, as mentioned, people usually don't trust government. And government of independence of Ukraine understand that not from first, they recently from accident. It's quite so far from accident. And understand that, and they established some special centers to learn, to study, teachers, doctors on the ground, and they aren't knowledge about real impact of nuclear accident. Provide special lecture in school, high school, in university. This main topic for Japan, but unfortunately, still no one established in Fukushima, no one center. Yeah. Former government expressed that no special fund to establish. New one now involved in amendments to Constitution.
mean,
All right,
it's
I have two things I want to jump in. Sort of, first of all, I think that in the second half we should take a look at the question of whether or not Fukushima Prefecture has been abandoned or not, or has it been developed the way it should. But before that, I want to sort of tie in the experience of Chernobyl, which is 28 years ago now, right? So in the end, in the experience of Ukraine, do you feel that the Chernobyl accident had a positive democratizing effect? Did the skepticism that it unleashed, was this something that made Ukraine a more healthy democracy, or
made it a democracy.
or did you for example, do you see this any similarities in the impact it may have in Japan, or the opposite? Do you think Japan basically, as Christoph is suggesting, it basically made the conservatives' reaction against such a movement so strong that it's actually having an anti-democratic effect? So what is your feeling, looking from Ukraine's experience 30 years later, how do you see what's happening in Japan?
30 years later, Ukrainian experience for Japan, very, very simple. Now 15th of nuclear units in Ukraine produce 48% of electricity in balance of Ukraine. That's very easy.
Okay. I see
Despite quite severe Chernobyl compared with Fukushima.
All right, first Tom and then back to Christoph.
Very quickly, I think politically in Ukraine, I think maybe Chernobyl was, dare I say, quite useful for the new Ukrainian state in that it separated them from Moscow and was a way, look what Moscow has done for us. So it was kind of politically quite useful in terms of creating the idea of the independence of Ukraine. I think potentially, yeah, that was just a comment.
Can I have covered both. I have covered Chernobyl as a journalist and Fukushima. And I believe that first of all, there was no Ukraine in 1986. The Ukraine starts in 1991. And after George Bush told the Ukrainians not to opt for independence because it would be bad for Gorbachev. So the whole Ukrainian reaction starts 5 years after the problem. The accident was managed from Moscow. And by the way, some of the management from Moscow was much better than in Fukushima. On Saturday after the accident, within 3 hours, they evacuated 43,000 people. In 3 hours. Here, it took them until June to evacuate Iitate. As to the comparison between the Soviet Union and Japan, I think you can read it on Open Democracy. I wrote 6 or 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, an article comparing the Soviet Union and Japan structurally. LDP and KPDSU, CPSU, that's structurally the same. But that's not the topic now. I believe, and I can follow that with details, I believe Chernobyl is the beginning of Glasnost. And Glasnost, and I can tell you which newspaper when. You had Estonian, how were they called? The guys to clean up. Liquidators, yes. You had Estonian liquidators. These Estonian liquidators, they lost their hair and stuff. They went back to Estonia. In late summer of 1986, the youth newspaper of the Estonian party had some articles. Now, it was totally against the law to send a youth newspaper from Estonia abroad. But Estonia had very good relations with the exiled Estonians in Stockholm. So some people took photos of these newspapers and brought these photos to Stockholm, where I went to see them in November or December 1986. And this was probably one of the very first really Glasnost-like articles. And of course, when you start it, you can't stop it, especially with nations like the nations in the Soviet Union. In Japan, you can start it and nobody pays attention if it's in some off mainstream newspaper. But Chernobyl is the beginning of Glasnost. Glasnost is responsible for the people in the Soviet Union to ask for more and more and more. So Chernobyl is the beginning of the collapse of the Soviet Union. Of course, Japan will not collapse in that sense, but the Japanese political establishment could collapse, I think.
Okay. Anybody want to jump in before we go to the break? All right, break it is. So, of course, we still need to look at a few issues after the break, including a very big one, which is how much trouble is Mr. Abe going to get himself into if he starts restarting these reactors. There are a few sort of hot-button issues which Abe seems to be setting himself up for. Obviously, the nuclear reactors is one. The Futenma base issue could be another. And, of course, if Abenomics begins to peter out or people lose faith in it, that could be another. So there's definitely, but certainly the nuclear issue is one of the things that could trigger some problems for this regime if they push too hard on it and if there's a negative reaction to it. So I think that when we come back, I'd like to start by taking a look at that question. How hard is this LDP really going to push forward on this issue? And if they do, how much trouble is it going to get them into, or are they going to roll over the opposition? That's the question I want to know next. Thanks. 10-minute break. We'll start again at 7:20. A year and a half later, and still there's no reactors on. So they haven't pushed it as hard as they could have. They're taking it slower than they might have done. So do we now expect that Abe, I mean, we've been talking about him spending political capital. How much more is he going to spend on this nuclear issue to restart these reactors? And the other question is, if he does push hard, if you think he is going to go ahead and restart these reactors, how much of a counter-reaction from the anti-nuclear forces are we expecting, or are they pretty much already played out? Have they done, I mean, is it now just a band of a few hundred people, and that's all we're going to get from them? So I start this question for Mr. Shiina. First of all, your prediction, is the Abe administration really seriously going to start flipping on reactors, or is it going to be careful the way it has been so far?
I'm not sure he's really going to restart the nuclear power. I think the media says the Sendai Genpatsu is going to open this December. Still, I think it's this gonna be plausible. I think so. Seeing that this struggling and this decision of this means that the decision of the Abe's amendment of the interpretation of Article 9, I think he is going to make the decision to restart the nuclear power if the NRA admits that the Sendai Genpatsu is reaching the level of the regulations. I think so. The second question is how, or what is our role, opposition's role? I think so. we now we means the member of unity parties are discussing how to react if Abe's make decisions to restart the nuclear powers. So that's because we are saying we are saying a future abolishment of the nuclear power, which means we accept that we accept the restart of the nuclear powers. But still, the around 60 people are opposing to the nuclear power. Still, so how to make the presence, how to make the presentation of our kind of positions to the peoples. So if the government makes the decision to start the reactors, so should we do the anti-nuclear campaign, or we make this okay? Or so we are now on the discussions. So, but still, my opinion is that we think that if Abe has decided to reopen the Sendai nuclear reactor, we make the presentation to admit this kind of thing to make the people perceived, I think.
So, as I understand it, at least in the case of the Sendai nuclear reactor, if the Nuclear Regulation Authority says it's okay, and if the Abe administration turns it on, your expectation is that the opposition parties, at least your opposition party, will not fight very hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, but still, some opposition parties are going to strong oppositions, like a Communist Party or social or democratic parties, and I don't know the position of the DPJs. I think how DPJ react to the Abe's decisions.
Well, I think the DPJ doesn't know what the DPJ is going to do. All right, Chris, I throw it over to you. Same two questions. How hard of a push do you expect Abe to really make on this? And if he does make a significant push, how much of a counter push can he expect?
Well, my short answer would be I think he's definitely going to push for reactor restarts, and I'm not even sure if he'll need to push that hard. I think there's momentum moving towards restarts. We've got quite a few reactors, which are now going through the safety checks, and I think what the pro-nuclear supporters are hoping for is that Sendai and the other early reactors will kind of create a certain momentum, and with each restart, this will make the next restart a little bit easier. So you start with the safest, the newest reactors, and then kind of work your way from there. I think the key issue is not whether reactors are going to restart, but how much. And there was very useful report by Reuters the other month where they broke down the status of Japan's nuclear reactors, and roughly, there are about 14 which should be able to match the NRA's regulatory standards. Then of the remainder, about half of them probably will not meet the new standards, and about half are kind of in a grey zone. Now, I imagine that sooner or later it'll be, for these kind of the first 10 to 15 reactors, these should be able to go online, perhaps with, I'm sure there'll be some pushback, but not enough pushback to stop it happening. The real question is what happens when you get to reactors where it's less clear whether they match the NRA's regulatory standards. Specifically, the older reactors. Now, it strikes me that the major problem here is we're moving towards a very suboptimal kind of energy solution, where if we have these 14 reactors back online, realistically they're not going to provide much more than 10% of Japan's energy. So we have a situation where we have the risks and the costs of nuclear power without much of the benefit. And this is a really unproductive situation to be in. And ultimately, for nuclear power to be significant in Japan, we're going to have to move to a situation where we have older reactors coming online or newer reactors being built. And for that, there needs to be a lot more public support than what there exists at the moment. It also, I think another important point which is worth raising about this is a lot of this is going to come down towards local politics. This is going to be quite determinative in whether reactors come online. And not only the immediate host communities, but I think an especially important stakeholder will be nearby communities which do not get the economic benefits of reactors, but are faced with the potential risks. So nearby communities, whether they undertake lawsuits or try to prevent the restarts, this strikes me as where he could run into problems.
Okay, I saw Sebastian and then Patrick had comments.
Sebastian Master from the German Institute for Japanese Studies / Tokyo University Sendai. Just want to pick you up on the last comment you said that there's a negative cost-benefit calculation with the nuclear power plant. So I wonder to what extent this Abe's decision, not even Abe's decision, but his predecessors of developing nuclear energy as an export sector play into Abe's push for restarting this energy, those nuclear power plants. Is it something that you have to restart in order to be more trustable if you want to export them? Is that something that is more important than actually restarting them at home?
It strikes me as, I think this is actually a very clever strategy. Beyond the economic benefits, what this does is it further embeds Japan into the global nuclear market. Now, what was interesting is when, for a second, the DPJ, when they're in power, dallied with pushing Japan towards no nuclear, there was immediately very strong pushback from the United States. And this is partly to do with the fact that America is heavily reliant upon Japanese nuclear technology. So the more countries where Japanese nuclear technology is being used, I think the more difficult it makes it to actually get rid of it at home. So I think it's actually a very clever strategy of embedding nuclear technology deeply into the Japanese economy. I mean, the other issue which is never talked about in all of this is even a limited amount of reactors having to be decommissioned. We're talking huge amounts of money here, right? And the more reactors which don't meet the safety standards, each reactor decommissioned, this is a huge amount of money. So there are a lot of costs which are potentially connecting to the economic issue. So I think this is a really big point.
Patrick?
Patrick Zollner, Zürcher Zeitung from Switzerland. You mentioned these reactors which are sort of iffy if they can or should come back. Well, this raises the question, will the NRA pass these reactors? Because if I understand the process, the NRA has to pass them before the government can take the political decision. Shiina-san, you said before that for you the biggest change is this new, stronger NRA. But is it strong enough to resist these kind of pressures? Will they really go by technical standards of safety, or will they crave into political pressure at some point?
And let me jump in on that. I believe a story just in the last few weeks was that one of the very strongly anti-nuclear commissioners was replaced by the Abe administration with somebody who's considered to be part of the nuclear village. So it could be the Abe administration uses personnel appointments to destroy the NRA's independence. So throw that in there too.
Okay, I can come in on that with a couple of points. I mean, the NRA, first of all, I would like to make the point that I think on the whole the NRA has done a very good job to date with trying to assert its independence. It also has pretty limited resources. It's got a staff of about 1,000 people, so they really have quite limited resources doing a very difficult task. I can't comment on what they'll do in terms of some of these iffy ones, whether they'll pass them or not. But an important issue is Abe cannot lean too much upon the NRA, because the NRA being perceived as being independent is really important, I think, for there being sufficient acceptance amongst the public for restarts to happen. And if you start having too much political interference going on in the into the NRA's business, it's going to be, I think that you're going to start having more pushback from the public. So I think Abe actually needs the NRA to be independent, but not too independent. But it's quite hard for him to manage this. And actually, I mean, I also want to make a brief point about Professor Tanaka being appointed to the NRA board. I should say here I'm actually a little bit biased because I've had the opportunity to work with Professor Tanaka over the last year or two through my involvement in a research project at the United Nations University called the Fukushima Global Communications Project, which actually is funded by the NRA. So I should also make this clear. I'm not... yeah, so does that make me part of the nuclear village? I'm not sure. But... oh, God, well, I mean, hopefully this won't ruin any future political appointments that I may be looking for. But I think with Professor Tanaka, I think it is important to also note that post-2011, he's been heavily involved in Fukushima and is very aware of the social costs. And I understand he has strong links to the nuclear village, but I would at least be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and see how he takes his role. And it was actually interesting at this meeting we had recently with the NRA's international advisors. Professor Tanaka was asking quite critical questions of the advisors. So I would like to say let's see what happens. And this relates to the point I was raising earlier: who can we trust in Japan? We need nuclear experts. How many nuclear experts do we know that do not have some connections to the nuclear village? It starts being a short list, and this is a challenge.
And also, I would like to point out also the personal issues, right? I think the Mr. Shimazaki, Professor Shimazaki, should resign after the Tanaka-san and one more is jump into the board. So Shimazaki-san is the most strongest opponent to the reactor reopen. So this is the Abe's, I think, strategies, Prime Minister's strategy to reopen reopen the nuclear reactors. But I think still my thought is that the new 5 people are still needed to be independent to make them credible from the viewpoints of the national and not as well as from the viewpoints of international communities, right? So I think the new 2 peoples are still, as you said, so still going to make credible decisions about the kind of what nuclear reactors can reach the standard or not. So, and also I would like to add one more. So my answer is sorry. So my answer is so it's strong, but I'm not sure it's strong enough or not. So and also I would like to add one more issues, which what I mean is that there are issues how to make the nearby citizens consent about about nuclear reactor reopens. So the Japanese government style of risk communications is not totally changed. Government thinks that they need to disclose correct data and correct informations. But I think risk communication is not that kind of thing, I think. So how to make the public participations from the nearby people. So this is the second hurdle, I think.
So could I just come in with a point while we're talking about the NRA? I think another issue which I want to raise here is if we remember the wording of the Kurokawa report, there's this very striking phrase that this was a man-made disaster.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if Professor Kurokawa was being conscious of how gendered his language was when he made this statement, but it is very accurate. Basically, every single person involved in this disaster was a man. Okay, and this, when we've been talking a lot about gender issues in Japan recently, but one area where it hasn't been discussed is in regards to Fukushima and nuclear issues, and I would argue it's actually very relevant. Okay, one of the 5 commissioners of the NRA is a woman, but none of the senior management are women. All the NRA executives are all men. Out of a staff of about 1,000, you have 90 women, so less than 10%. TEPCO did not have their first female executive until 2013. When the plant was in meltdown, basically every single person there was a man. This really was a man-made disaster. And so far it's been the solutions have all been man-made as well. And there's been quite a lot of studies which have looked at the way that men and women understand risk differently, okay? And I think there needs to be a much better representation of women in all parts of the nuclear industry, but especially if they're in the NRA. And this is something which hasn't been discussed about, but I think it's quite an important topic.
Oh, you're hinting, but why don't you say more clearly, what do you think a more balanced gender a policy within the nuclear industry would bring about?
Well, generally, what studies have indicated is that men seem to understand risk in terms of issues which can be solved through scientific or technological solutions. Also, primarily understanding risk in terms of economic issues, whereas women tend to focus a lot more on health and also environmental risks. Okay, and if you look at the people which have been most severely affected by the disaster, a large portion of them have been women. It's exactly the same in all nuclear disasters or nuclear accidents. After 3 Mile Island, after Chernobyl, after Fukushima, mothers especially are very heavily affected. It's important to get these type of voices involved, and at the very least, I cannot see how it could not make a slightly positive difference.
Okay. Well, actually, I think earlier today our press conference was Women of Fukushima, but first here and then you.
Thomas Halde, journalist from Switzerland. I do have a question about the anti-nuke movement. How big is it really? Is it only a wish of the foreign media and some anti-nuke people? And in the end, the Japanese are not so really proud to go on the street and say no to nuke. And in the end, if we see the amount of people on the street, it was nothing comparing to the number of people in Japan.
And if I may add, I mean, the other night I was at the protest in front of the Kante about the reinterpretation of the Constitution, and almost all the people I saw there were the same people I saw at the anti-nuclear demonstrations.
Exactly. Exactly the same people.
So, but let's jump on that question. It's a very important question. How big is, I mean, okay, 60% may poll in a newspaper they're against nuclear power, but of that 60%, how many of them are really going to do anything about it if the government says, well, we're just going to dismiss your point of view?
Well, I think this is where the point I was making earlier about local communities becomes important, because less important is the size of the anti-nuclear sentiment and where it's coming from. Okay, so if we have very strong or significant anti-nuclear pushback in local communities where they're trying to get restarts, then it could be determinative. But based upon the Tokyo elections, the national elections, it hasn't been determinative there. And if we want to try and put a positive spin on it, you know, there is there is an opportunity there for an enterprising politician to put together a interesting or persuasive kind of anti-nuclear argument, but I haven't seen it done yet, and I'm not that convinced about it will be anytime soon. So it strikes me as the anti-nuclear sentiment will kind of be there, but continue to be not determinative, except for perhaps some local communities where there are restarts.
But in the end, the election system is so that in the end there is no impact, because LDP is winning also the next election.
But there's but I mean, for the restarts, they need to have local. They need to have the consent from local communities. So that's one issue. And then, you know, we have seen some lawsuits from neighbouring communities. So this could be two ways it could influence. But at a kind of a general national level, probably it's not going to have an important role. You think it would have peaked by now.
Patrick?
I think so. I have many friends in Fukushima, so who are evacuated from the areas of the exclusion zones, right? So when we communicate with them, so they are strongly opposed to, of course, the nuclear powers, and so many many people in my constituencies, so young mothers and young men are still not so strong, but still they are saying that. So in the future, they hope, they wish nuclear power should be abolished. But still, they are knowing that their statement is not so persuasive, and also their statement is realistic in this time. So their statement is still kind of hope or wish, but still, I mean, it's not realistic statement and a realistic policy. But still, I think many people are still thinking that if we don't know, we need not the nuclear powers, and nuclear power should be abolished. So it's kind of sentimental or wish, but still there are, I think.
Let me follow up on a very specific question. You're a politician,
Yeah.
and you get letters and comments from constituents. In a week, are you getting a lot of anti-nuclear people pushing you, saying, "Please, my representative, don't go for nuclear power"? Or are you not getting any such pressure at all?
And this time, no, nothing. So, and this time, I'm getting the letters mainly about about the Article 9s, right? So the people's mind are changing, flip-flopping. Yeah.
What do let us say?
Many people who send letters are the opponents. So I mean, the people for the government policy doesn't write the letter. So.
Okay, Patrick.
As we are a purely male group here, I would like to take on this gender issue you brought up before, because you said NRA is very male, TEPCO is very male. I guess the same thing goes for other utilities too. Politics are very male here, and actually they've become more male with the 2012 elections. And these males are supposed to put women into positions where they can make a change. How is that supposed to happen?
Well, I mean, I think Abe, for more pragmatic economic reasons, has been pushing for greater gender equality. And we can all question about how much he means it, and we can all question about how much it coheres with his larger worldview. But he's put this issue out there, and I think there's a real opportunity to kind of capitalize on this. And in this kind of discussion we have at the moment, as a result of what happened in the Tokyo Assembly, this is a chance to push gender equality. I mean, as I'm sure you know, Japan is ridiculously poorly ranked when it comes to gender equality. I think the most recent gender equality index had us at 105. And what's really interesting, if you look at the index, they do this a couple of indicators from memory. It's health, education, political participation, economic participation, right? With health and education, Japan is fantastic. They're right at the top, which really indicates exactly how bad political participation and economic participation are. And Abe, whether he meant it or not, has put this out there as an issue, and I think there's an opportunity to capitalise on it and push it. And nuclear, is hardly the only issue, as you're saying, where men are dominant. I work at a Japanese university. 13% of Japanese professors are female. Right? So exactly the same situation.
This is in social sciences.
No, across the board, I'm in social sciences, but in Japanese universities in Toto, it's about 13% of professors are female, right? So I mean, I've started teaching gender politics simply, to try and bring about some type of small change. And there's no, I teach a lot of very smart, intelligent, motivated women with a lot of potential, and to think that they're going to have their kind of opportunities kind of limited is incredibly frustrating. So I think we can all make these kind of small changes which can have a positive impact. And in the case of the NRA, Abe's been talking a lot about increasing the amount of women involved in their government. This can be one way of doing that, and potentially can also provide different perspectives on risk. I don't see what's not to benefit from it.
Okay, looks like you want to say something.
Yes, gender equality. I mean, the point is, in the NRA, you need experts. And experts, especially also women, when they go through this kind of engineering studies and so on, they also, of course, take up this kind of engineering view of the world. They become much more male in a way just by the topic that they are studying. Right? I mean, this is just the mindset of engineers in general, I think, when you're dealing with this kind of issues. So I have sometimes my doubts that in this specific area, basically, women make such a big difference. Where I can see it is more in the political arena, where basically the political questions have to be answered. Yeah, what kind of risk is politically and socially acceptable? So I see there kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a very legitimate point, and for the most part, I do agree with you. But I mean, it is worth pointing out that I mean, not all of the commissioners are nuclear experts. Okay, Commissioner Shima, who's about to finish his tenure, I mean, he was a diplomat, so there is no reason why you couldn't have more female commissioners. But I do agree with your general point. This is a political issue, and this is where we need greater gender representation as well.
Well, I'm faced with a very difficult decision. I see a couple of people who want to jump in, but we also have about 6 or 7 minutes left. And there is one other topic that I want to at least touch on briefly before we finish up. This is about the politics of Fukushima tonight, but we haven't really talked anything about Fukushima Prefecture. And so I remember that shortly after 3/11, some political analysts were expecting that after that great disaster, there might be kind of a new breed of politicians that came out of the disaster-affected regions that kind of woken up by such a terrible thing, a more dynamic, more aggressive kind of politician, perhaps. Maybe Japan's next great national leader might come out of these regions. But, so far, it's not clear that we've seen any kind of change in even the local politics. So I want to just throw this question to our two speakers and to the room. Maybe after a delayed reaction, are we expecting a movement out of the local area that's going to in some way impact national politics? Or is it just going to be another dying rural area of Japan just the same as any other?
My cop-out political scientist answer would be that it's too early to tell. I mean, we are only 3.5 years, and the structural impediments in Japanese politics are pretty severe. So, I mean, I think this is really something, it's too early to say. But there have been some positive dimensions in terms of civil society developments, and let's see where these go. It'll be interesting to see. This is not a kind of Fukushima local issue, but I think the way that Koizumi has come back into the political ring in the last year or so has been quite interesting, and I wonder whether this could potentially open up some interesting political space in the future. But I don't know enough about local politics in Fukushima to comment any further.
Okay, same to you. Do you feel like the local political scene is going to produce anything that we need to be aware of nationally?
It's difficult. My sense says that it's negative, but still, the fact is, so there were some local elections from this 1 year. So Iwaki City, Hirono town, and Kawauchi village, Minami Soma city, and so on. Except Minami Soma, all leaders lost, which means that the leaders experienced leaders who experienced the nuclear disasters, and all are lost. So this is how can I say? This is the some kind of aspect of the local people want some change. Only I can say is this fact, but still, these leaders are good or whether these good leaders are good or not should be more monitored. I'm not sure these are their good leaders or not.
Okay, well, there were a couple of questions, so why don't you go, Sebastian?
It doesn't relate particularly to the question you've asked, but I think, Chris, in the first round, You have mentioned as one of the outcomes of Fukushima is the democratization of the energy sector. I wonder, so what's your evaluation, for instance, on measures, for instance, the introduction of a feed-in tariff scheme by Cannes? Have these measures been effective? To what extent has the renewable energy sector actually developed? So can you elaborate a bit more on what you mean with the democratization of the energy sector?
Well, I guess to elaborate on what I meant, I think moving forward, energy policy is something which no longer can be safely determined by, for lack of a better term, the nuclear village. And I think the public now has a much greater role in the debate. They may not have a determinative voice, but this issue is much more politicized compared to what it was a couple of years ago, and I can't see this disappearing anytime soon. So energy policy has become politicized. I think that's significant. In terms of renewables, I simply can't say much because this is beyond my area of expertise. Andrew DeWitt at Rikyo University has been doing a lot of very interesting work on this topic, and from what I've read of his and other scholarship is there seems like there's quite a lot of interesting movements taking place at the local level in Japan, and there's quite a lot of initiatives which might have potential. But yeah, I can't say anything further on this.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll just leave it there unless somebody has a final question they want to ask. Christoph has disappeared. He pulled his. I thought ending with you would have been very nice.
Yeah, I wonder how much Abe really cares about nuclear power, and then I wonder how much Abe cares about anything. If you see his pattern, he wants to change. Has a new constitution. Okay, that doesn't work. Then he has a way to change the constitution by changing the way the constitution is changed. Okay, that doesn't work. So he changes the interpretation of the constitution, and then he goes to tell the press, actually nothing much changes. And the same with the secrecy law. And he wants to change the economy. What has he changed? I mean, he has this huge political capital. For 18 months, he hasn't done anything in the economy. Does he care at all, or is he actually exactly like Koizumi was, like Abe, the first Abe was, like the Soviet leaders were? They want to stay in power, and whatever matters, they don't really care. I feel like that when I see it. And then to draw the conclusion, I think he will turn on a few nuclear power plants, then it looks okay, and the nuclear village is happy. The cost-benefit calculation, he doesn't care. He doesn't even understand that, I think.
All right. As expected, it was a very wonderful final question.
Okay.
So is that it? I mean, basically, is just Abe going to look for the most lowest common denominator, face-saving way out, turn on a few reactors, say he did his job, and that's the end of it?
Well, I mean, I think the difficult thing is if you're really pro-nuclear in Japan, ultimately you need to make an argument for new reactors, and that is a very difficult argument to make. I can't comment on what Abe genuinely believes, but he does seem to be a politician which is motivated by ideals and beliefs. So I'd be hesitant to see it as purely being about staying in power. But I really do think when we look back on the current moment in Japanese politics, I think we'll really see this as kind of a really big missed opportunity. Abe is in a position where he has a lot of political power, he has a lot of political capital, there is a lot which he could be doing, and I do not think he's spending that political capital wisely in terms of Japanese, the future of Japan. And I think when we look back, this will really be seen as a missed opportunity.
Okay, and we'll give the final word to Shiina Sensei, an opposition politician. This is a free chance to take a whack at the Prime Minister.
I think the Prime Minister Abe is strongly going to the reopen to nuclear reactors. This is because I think so the bureaucracy, because of the bureaucracy system. I think the cabinet office now is strongly governed by the Metis bureaucracies. I think so. When the Metis people are saying every day something to Mr. Abe, so he knows very much things about the nuclear power's necessity in the sense of economic rehabilitation or economic reboost. Right? So I think so. I think that some people in the ruling party said the Prime Minister Abe is strongly keen to reopen and strongly keen to make the nuclear reactors to going. So sorry, someone called me. So. But this is the challenge to our opposition parties. So we are trying to make more persuasive arguments to anti-nuclear issues. So what I learned from the gender issues. So I need to say to the government, I want to say to the government that the gender equality issues in the TEPCO board and NRA board and NRA secretariat that should be kept. So I know very good things to. Say them there. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we have one final little tradition here, and that is that these two gentlemen, and I'm sorry to say that they are both men, they have just earned a one-year honorary membership to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. I have them here in my hand. Mr. Tsuyoshi Shiina of the Unity Party, you are now a member of the FCCJ for the next year.
Oh, thank you very much.
And Mr. Christopher Hobson, you are also a member of the FCCJ for the next year.
Thank you very much.
And as I have already mentioned to you during the break, but now I'll do it under the pressure of the full audience, this series of political roundtables is being held roughly once a month, and it is the intention to build a community and to build up our knowledge over time. So now that you have earned your one-year membership, and since this is in practice a membership-only event, we hope that you'll come when there are other politicians and other analysts here to join us around the table to help enrich the discussion even when you're not the main guests. So please come back, and we're looking forward to seeing you soon. And that's it for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.